Test one, two, test, test. Okay, everybody. We are back. Do I have a motion to return to open session?
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Franklin and a second by Ms. Bond.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Dietrich?
Yes.
Ms. Harton?
Yes.
Yes.
Ms.
Yes.
President Piper?
Motion carries. We are back to open session. All right. Do I have a motion to certify closed session that to the best of every member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Franklin and a second by Ms. Bond.
Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
Ms. Franklin?
Yes.
Dr. Dietrich?
Yes.
Ms. Harton?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Hitt?
Yes.
President Piper?
All right, the motion carries. Now we will go to our MCPS mission and belief statements. Our student representatives tonight are Alexandra Jobst from Auburn High School and Alicia Wang from Blacksburg High School. Will you please read our mission and belief statements?
MCPS is an innovative educational community. We value diversity, and we are committed to equity and inclusion.
MCPS empowers learners to realize success in an ever-changing global society through collaboration with communities, families, staff, and students. MCPS provides a safe, engaging learning environment and intentional exposure to positive social, emotional, and academic experiences.
All students can learn in order to pursue their dreams. Schools are safe places of joy, wonder, and creativity. Every person deserves to be loved, valued, and respected. Kindness is an essential skill of a responsible, productive community member. The diversity of our community is one of our greatest strengths.
All people deserve equitable access to opportunities and resources. Every child deserves an advocate. Honoring the voices of students and other stakeholders strengthens the school community. Open communication and feedback are vital to our growth. Learning and teaching are collective efforts that begin at birth and will involve the entire community. Relationship building and high expectations are foundational to student success.
Okay, great. Thank you both. Next up is public address. We welcome the opportunity to hear from students, parents, employees, and community members about education matters in this community. As a reminder, the board sets aside 30 minutes to start our public address. We'll have the option to extend in 30-minute increments, which Ms. Osborne will remind us of. If there are additional speakers after 90 minutes, the board will continue with their business meeting and hold one additional 30-minute session at the end of the business meeting. The clock continues through applause and disruptions. The more disruptions there are, the fewer speakers who get to address the board. I will call each speaker up by name in the order that they signed up, and each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. Yeah, that wasn't on the agenda, but is that, if that's okay with the board, we could do a student report section before we go into public address. Is that okay?
Sounds good to me.
Thanks.
This month at Auburn High School, we are starting open gyms for spring sports. Any students interested are welcome to come. Our Math Mac team, along with our all-around team, both won their matches yesterday, Monday, January 22nd, and they have an upcoming match this Thursday. Soon we will be having a special guest speaker from the Governor's School to come talk to our students who might be interested in attending the Governor's School. We recently had a career planning night where upcoming students could interact with teachers and see what they might be interested in class-wise. We hope for a fantastic spring season. Go Eagles.
Great, thank you so much. Alicia, you're good?
Yes, sir, I gave mine last time.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks for noting that, Ms. Franklin, appreciate it. All right, next up is public address. I can read that whole thing again. Our next agenda item is public address. We welcome the opportunity to hear from students, parents, employees, and community members about education matters. As a reminder, the board sets aside 30 minutes to start our public address. The option to extend in 30-minute increments, which Ms. Osborne will remind us of. If there are additional speakers after 90 minutes, the board will continue the business meeting and hold one additional 30-minute session at the end. Clock continues for applause and disruptions. The more disruptions there are, the fewer speakers who get to address the board. I will call each speaker up by name in the order that they are signed up. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. The board does not respond to speakers during public address. The screens will show when the speaker has 30 seconds remaining and when the time is up. Please state your name and the area of the county you live in. The first speaker is Dr. Wendy Eckenrod Green, and following her will be Chad Harris. Do we not have Dr. Eckenrod Green here tonight? Okay. Okay, then we'll move on to Chad Harris, followed by Kimberly Williamson. Do we have Chad Harris? All right. Do we have Kimberly Williamson? There, we got one.
I'm Kimberly Williamson from Christiansburg. Members of the school board, especially those who were recently elected, I sincerely pray that each of you will have a literal come to Jesus moment regarding various Marxist, LGBTQ, pornography, and anti-parental rights positions and beliefs. For the sake of the children and the families at MCPS, I offer a prayer and declaration as adapted from Dutch Sheets' Give Him 15 post from December 13, 2023. Father God, our nation has become like biblical Mount Horeb, a barren, desolate waste place, spiritually speaking. Our government is defiled, dishonest, and incompetent. Our education system has become nothing more than a propagandizing arm of evil. Our system of justice is unjust. Our borders are open. We are like an ancient city without walls, and our cities are filled with violence. We sacrifice our babies, mutilate our children, and no longer know the difference between men and women. And we as a society are somehow proud of this. Father God, you would have every right to destroy us and shake the dust off your feet as you leave, but you would rather transform our barren, desolate waste place into something good and beautiful, bringing wisdom from the pain and good from evil. You have said you are going to save us, and I, along with many others, believe you. Just as biblical Mount Horeb was transformed from barren and desolate into the mountain of God where your glory burned brightly, we too will see your redemptive glory flashing from this barren, desolate waste place. So I prophesy to the land, you will live again. I prophesy to the children, you will be taught of the Lord and transformed into passionate lovers of God's presence. I prophesy to the government, you will once again come under the influence of God. I prophesy to the education system, you will no longer be led by propagandists and fools. And I prophesy to the justice system, you will have righteous judges as before. America, Virginia, New River Valley, Montgomery County, you will live and not die, and once again declare the works of God as you did in the past. And may each of you come to deeply know Jesus this year and heed the righteous ways of God in the decisions you make. Amen.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Williamson. Next up is Chris Thomas.
Members of the board, I'll keep this brief. Every time this board opens the floor for public address, my friends on the right try to lead the whole room to Jesus. They remind us that their God doesn't approve of LGBTQ kids. They tell us which books their faith identifies as acceptable. They remind us of all the people and ideas and political philosophies that they hate. That's their right. They get to believe those things. But this is not the place for a sermon. This board has a job, and that job is to administer our schools. We have public address, and the purpose of that address is to allow we the people to petition our government, our school board, about our government and our school board. But none of us, not me, not the students, certainly not any of you, have any call or any obligation or indeed any reasonable responsibility to know what the Bible says, to know what the Christian teachings are, and certainly not to administer our schools according to them. This board exists to serve Montgomery County, all of Montgomery County, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Sikh alike, atheist alike. And so what Christianity has to say, what Jesus has to say, what God the Father has to say about how our schools ought to be administered has no bearing here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Board, we have a request from Mr. Earl Brown. He has asked to speak again tonight, but he didn't have a computer to sign up to speak. Are we okay with allowing him to speak last? Okay. Mr. Brown?
My name is Earl Brown, and I'm from Blacksburg, Virginia, and I would like to welcome, of course, the new board members and so forth, and Dr. Bragan, I'm speaking to you as well as to the board. And where I left off last time, I didn't realize 3 minutes goes by so fast. But anyway, the last issue I was talking about was custodians being paid when they start somewhere between 45 and 60 days. And then, of course, after COVID, there was a problem in, for employers as far as recruiting and employing individuals and retaining them and so forth. And I don't know if that has changed much since COVID and so forth. But on January the 8th in the paper stated that the teachers, there is a shortage ongoing in Virginia, and it said the number was like 3,600 teachers. And then later on, following a couple weeks later, they said that non-teaching positions, there were about 9,000 of those that were available within the state and so forth. Just would like to mention that. And as far as the custodians go, I think that one recommendation that I would like to make is that they, as far as their head and senior custodians, if they would somehow receive some type of supervisory and employee training courses and so forth, I think that would be very helpful to them. And as the last thing that I would like to speak about would be teachers. And I would just say that teachers deserve a clean, safe room area to provide instruction for all Montgomery County students. Students deserve a clean, safe room area to provide instruction, to receive instruction from the teachers. The students do. As far as your custodians, they work to provide a clean area, safe environment for teachers, students, parents, and visitors for the school system. So just consider those individuals as you make your decisions, because those components all come together. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. All right, and that's all we have for a public address tonight. We will move on to consent items. If no one wishes to move an item out of consent, we will consider these items approved. Okay. Next up is the payment of the bills. Do I have a motion to approve the payment of the bills as presented?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Franklin and a second by Ms. Bond.
Yes.
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 Hudson. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but were the field trips on there for information purposes, or did we need to vote on that? There was
Those were
no-
consent.
Okay.
Motion passes. Did you have a question about those, Ms. Barton?
Just since they were listed separately, I thought we had done field trips separately before, so I just was making sure.
Okay. Now we're on to our business meeting. First up is a report from Superintendent.
Yes, Board Chair Hudson, I was hoping to use that time to present our statement of needs for the superintendent and our budget for next year with Dr. Whitaker. So if we could either skip over that part, or you allow me to use that time to do the budget presentation, whichever works for you.
Sure.
Right. So, as you know, this is that time of year where we present to the school board what our needs are for the budget for next year. Myself, our administrative team, and Dr. Whitaker, and the team in finance, we worked diligently over the last probably couple of months to put this together, develop it. And what we're going to present to you tonight is what we think is a fair and reasonable and fiscally accountable request for the funding we need to make sure our schools continue to thrive for the next school year, and that we could accomplish all the things that we set out to do in our mission as we move forward. So what we're going to do is Dr. Whitaker is going to take the lead for a lot of this because it's developed out of finance, and we'll go through these slides. We'll present at the end a summary of what our ask is, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Dr. Whitaker, if you could begin. I don't think it's on, Dr. Whitaker.
All right, microphone check. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So today we will be providing our statement of needs. Got it? There you go. All right. So first, just a brief overview of what we will be going through today. So first, we're going to provide a reminder of our funding for the fiscal year 23-24 that we're currently in. We'll explain our budget development process, then provide an overview of the governor's proposed budget. Dr. Bragan will address the budget development goals. We'll discuss those each in detail, and then we will provide the overall summary of the superintendent's statement of needs, and then present the budget calendar as it will roll forward for the remainder of the school year. It's always first important to reflect upon why we're all here. And our mission in Montgomery County Schools is very important. I'm not going to read it again because our students do read that for us, but it is important for us to always focus on our why, and our why is the students that we serve each day. As a reminder of our funding for the 23-24 school year, we were able to accomplish quite a few things. So for this year, we were able to provide a 5% salary increase in the fall, and then in this month of January, effective at the end of this, it'll be showing in paychecks this month, is an additional 2% pay raise for this year. We were able to provide salary corrections for individual staff members after completion of a salary study that was conducted by the Human Resources Department. That allowed individuals who had been placed differently, so 1 year, being given 1 year of experience for 2 years of experience, it was able to place them correctly on those scales. We were able to focus on addressing the needs of our self-funded health insurance account without increasing our employee premiums. We were also able to hire 4 full-time athletic trainers and 4 additional custodians. Our budget development process, as Dr. Bragan stated, started way back in October. And so we began in October meeting with employee groups to talk with them about preparing for budget presentations to the board. The goal of those budget presentations is for the board to have an opportunity to hear from our employees directly so that you all are able to understand what it is that they would like to see in the upcoming budget. In November, we provided each school and department with a budget request template so that each school and department could ask for the additional funds that they would like and provide a justification for those needs. In December, the employee group representatives presented to the board their suggestions for the considerations for the budget for the 24-25 fiscal year. At that time, the Budget Development Team reviewed the individual and school budget requests, as well as reflecting upon those employee group presentations. We received the governor's proposed budget on December 20th, 2023. And then in January, on January 4th, we received the calculation tool. For our new board members, that's a tool that we received from the state that we put in our membership projected, and it provides us with the funds that we will receive in each of those funding categories, so that we're able to determine, are we going to get an increase in those areas, or might we see a decrease? So to provide for you an overview of the governor's proposed budget for this year. The overview of the governor's budget for this year. We did propose, we're projecting it based on 9,200 students. It's important for you to know that because that is a decrease of 364 students from this school year. That's based upon the trends we're seeing in declining enrollment. We do estimate, based upon the governor's proposed budget, that we are going to receive an additional $5.4 million in funding from the state. So while the budget does do a variety of things, it does fund the staffing requirements of the Literacy Act. It provides a 1% bonus in fiscal year 25 with a proposed 2% salary increase in fiscal year 26. There are also funds to bolster the teacher retirement fund. You'll see technical adjustments to lottery proceeds, sales tax, and incentive programs. Also, the removal of the sales tax hold harmless that you may remember was in place previously. So the increases that we see are due to the state's share on the routine benchmarking of costs in areas for the standards of quality and other direct aid programs. The adjustments include updates for factors such as salaries, data that comes from our annual school report, inflation, the updated local composite index, as well as adjustments for average daily membership.
All right, so, ready, Dr. Whitaker? So with all that in mind, when we took all that information and what are we going to include in this year's budget? You know, the first and foremost is to continue the programs that we currently have and make sure that we can ensure we're providing the highest caliber educational programs for all of our students within the county, and that we're adhering to our strategic plan and our educational goals. The next up was, we do think it's critical to provide our staff with a 5% raise. We'll talk more about why that's needed and why we want to remain competitive with recruiting our educators in the region, and we think that's important for us to continue to thrive. One of the other things we heard, and not just from our school board members, but from our community, is that we still have some employees that are making less than $15 an hour, and we don't think that's appropriate, so this budget would contain raising the minimum starting salaries for all employees to that $15 minimum. We also included extending the workday for paraprofessionals and nurses who currently work less than what the normal school day is, which is 7.5 hours. And we wanted to make sure they got up to speed on where that should be as well. And then, as you know, we heard at this meeting, and we've heard throughout the course of the year, we're trying, we have larger schools, and we added some capacity last year, and we're still trying to catch up with our custodial to make sure we have adequate funding of custodians to clean the spaces that we need to create those clean environments that Mr. Brown spoke of. Last year, we included in the budget an increase due to inflation for some of the supplies, materials, and other things that we have to order. And when we had to reduce it with the Board of Supervisors' reduction of our ask, that got taken away. And as you all know, none of those prices have gone down since last year, so we included some improvement there as well. One of the things we've been hearing, and not just from the school board, but from our community, is if there's any way we could facilitate payment for employees twice monthly as opposed to once a month, especially for some of our employees that don't make a great deal of money. And we've contained within this budget some things that will help us achieve that in the future as far as additional personnel and some way to record our time that Dr. Whitaker will speak of. And we also included the purchase of 8 new school buses. You know, the school buses they have like our cars, and like every other capital investment we have, they have a lifespan. We have about 120 buses or thereabouts. So what we'd like to do is continually buy on a regular basis, so nobody's driving a bus that's 20 years old. And in order to do that requires an investment. So we're going to proposed in this budget purchasing 8 new school buses. Last year, we didn't purchase any, because that was one of the reductions we had when we didn't have the ask that we asked for from the Board of Supervisors. And, you know, one of the things that you all may know when you go to the doctors and physicians is that everything is more expensive than it was in the past. And health field is no different. And the trend that we're operating under, an annual trend increase across the entire board of medical procedures and things, is around 10%. So we've included all those aspects in this budget and try to cover all that. And the next few slides, Dr. Whitaker will speak about those specifics.
So our goal, again, is always to continue to strengthen the strong instructional programs that we have aligned with the strategic plan, while also enhancing those. So we provided for you today just a variety of examples of those educational programs. So we have access to a wide variety of CTE courses: robotics, drones, pharmacy tech, cosmetology, welding, cybersecurity, culinary arts, just to name a few. Our students have access to rigorous courses. DE, AP courses are offered in all content areas. We have elementary and secondary coaches to support our teachers, particularly our new and provisionally licensed teachers. We ensure explicit, systematic literacy instruction. We provide access to STEM education for students beginning at the elementary level. We've worked to expand our pre-K programs, implemented unified PE. We provide high-quality professional development on specially designed instruction, engaging qualities of instruction, and science of reading, with a focus on improving the literacy of our students. And we always work to align instruction to evidence-based best practices. So we will be recommending additional staff in the instructional area for additional positions. Our next goal is to increase employee pay by utilizing 5%, by utilizing the 1% bonus that was proposed for SOQ positions, in addition to the local match. It's essential that we continue to focus on our employee pay. And while this slide shows a representation of starting salaries for teachers in surrounding school divisions, please know the 5% is for all of our scales in the division, for all employee groups on those scales. We do currently have the third highest starting salary for teachers in those surrounding divisions, but as you've seen year after year, you know, we can be first, second, or third, and fourth sometimes, seventh sometimes. Each division is always working to be at the top of that list. Pay does matter, and so we have to continue to focus on the starting pay for our teachers as well as all of our other employees. The next is, as we've discussed over many different board meetings that we've had, is increasing the hourly pay rate to $15 per hour. Provided for you here is a comparison of custodians and administrative assistants. These are starting pay rates, comparing ourselves to surrounding localities. While we did just put these two comparisons on the slide for today, any employee group that's on the pay scale currently that is below $15 an hour would move to a starting pay of $15 an hour. So that includes our aides, buildings and ground, custodians, administrative assistants. Those are all roles that right now start in the $13 or $14 an hour range that would move up to $15. School nutrition as well. Our next goal is to extend the time for our paraprofessionals and nurses so that they match the hours that our teachers and our students are in buildings. Our students don't arrive when that bell rings, and they don't leave as soon as it rings at the end of the day. So students arrive before and after school, and they do have needs. And so it makes logical sense for us to ensure that our aides and paraprofessionals are able to be in hours be in the building the same amount of time that we ask our teachers to be there, and that our students are going to be there in the building and needing assistance. That will both assist those individuals as well as will take, I believe, some load from our teachers who are doing some duties in those times that may be able to get a little bit of assistance from our other employees. We always need to focus on having clean, healthy buildings. We are proposing an increase of 4 additional custodians to our team. This will allow us to do a few things. One, it's going to allow us to have well-trained custodians when we have vacancies, so that if we have a vacancy, we're able to put somebody who knows what they're doing and has been trained into that vacancy. or if we have an employee who needs to take a vacation or be on leave, that we have a well-qualified individual to be in that place, as opposed to an absence that's very difficult to get custodial substitutes sometimes. As Dr. Bragan mentioned, we need to focus on increasing our funding for services, supplies, and materials. So we have included a flat 5% inflation in the budget, as well as specific areas that have not received increases in funding in the way that perhaps they should in the past few years. So this is increased for our transportation maintenance and parts, to pay for utilities, custodial supplies, equipment and services. As you've heard some of our employees speak about, we have some equipment that's 30, 35 years old that needs to be replaced. And so as opposed to waiting for everything to break down, we want to make sure that we can stay on top of that and have equipment replacement in place. $35,000 for instructional materials and supplies, and then also funding for Virtual Virginia, which was previously funded through our ESSER funds. As Dr. Bragan mentioned, we would like to be able to provide payroll on a semi-monthly basis. We would love to say it's as easy as just doing it, but it does take some extra things. And so one of those, as we talked about at the last board meeting, is the need for time clock. So we've included funds to allow for a time clock management system, as well as additional staff in the finance department to assist with the additional payroll processes that would take place and accounting regarding that. We have a fleet of 120 buses in operation. We have tried to replace 8 buses per year. We would like to move to a 10% replacement plan, but at this time are recommending 8 buses. This will allow us to continue to keep those buses on a good cycle, ensure that they are maintained, and that we don't get to a point where we have one year where we need 15 or 20 buses. They're very expensive. And so we need to stay on top of that, as opposed to waiting until we need more than we can manage within one period of time. Addressing the needs of our self-funded health insurance account is important. What you see in front of you today is a graph that shows the balance of that self-funded health insurance account since 2014, with the maximum amount that was in that account in the 1920 school year at about $4.7 million. As we shared with you last year, we've seen a significant decline in that account over the last few years, and worked diligently this year under Dr. Bragan's leadership to come up with ways to address the account without passing that on to our employees. So we were able to do prescription carve-out this year. You see the fund balance as of December 31st at $328,000. And you may say, that doesn't look like we did a whole lot within this school year. But as a reminder, our insurance plan cycle is October, not July. So the new plan began in October, and we haven't yet been able to see the impact of the work we've done. Our prescription rebates come quarterly, and we don't anticipate to see that first prescription rebate until March. They diagnose October, November, December. They process those, and then we will get those rebates in the coming months. So we project that at the end of this school year, we will have $1.7 million in our fund balance. And then with the additional funds that we are adding for this year, that we would have approximately 2.1. Again, those last two numbers in blue are projections of where we would like to see the account land. This, of course, is impacted by claims, the events that occur in our employees' lives. But our goal is to be able to continue to do this without passing that to our employee.
Thank you, Dr. Whitaker. If you look at this is the money slide, literally, where the money is and what our ask is. And, I'm just going to hit some of the numbers on the side here if you can follow along. And obviously, if there's any questions, we'll take those as well. So this is where everything that we spoke of in the previous slides comes out in the dollars and cents, right? So additional personnel for instruction there. We do have some students with special needs that we need more special needs teachers for. That would be in that area right there. We're looking at about 4 or 5 teachers for that area, depending on what the actual need would be, and that's not finalized until we have all the IEPs and the schedules for next year solidified. The additional personnel we spoke of is the 4 custodians, as well as the additional people in payroll, 2 payroll processors. I don't know exactly what we call that title, as well as an accountant will make up this here. The bulk of this increase is the raise. As I said, that's a 5% raise across the board. We did provide, and we're still trying to solidify, a stipend amount for special education instructors and teachers because we're having a hard time finding those people. And we think if we had, as some other divisions in the region have done, is provided a stipend, and it increased the number of people that applied for those positions or went into special education as a vocation as opposed to general ed. The $1.5 million increase here is for health insurance. As Dr. Whitaker spoke of last year, we moved to a prescriptions benefit manager and carved out prescription from our Anthem program that we use. And it's projected, again, knock on wood, I don't have the money in our hand yet, to save around $2 million, which would offset what that increase in the cost would be for claims this year. And as we said earlier, it's going up, we're predicting around 10%, and we got that from our actuaries and our insurance broker for next year. So we have to make up for that, and we have to fund that properly with the goal of, as Dr. Whitaker shared in the reserve account, right, at the end of next year, we project it'll be about $1.7 million. And that reserve account is we're self-insured. So should somebody get a catastrophic injury, or we have a series of people that need some pretty significant surgeries and things like that, we have to be able to cover that. And a safe spot for that reserve account is somewhere between $3 and $4 million. As we go back 5 years ago, we were a little over $4.5 million or whatever that was. So that's why that dollar amount is where that is there, okay? This is the teacher licensure. These are some of the things that we were doing this year through some ESSERS funds and things like that. The 5% increase is this number here, okay? The school buses, they cost a lot of money, right? So 8 of them is going to be there. This is our lapse funds, which is the difference between people retiring at a higher salary and we're hiring people at lower salaries. We anticipate that to be about $500,000. The increase we have in the paraprofessionals, the 7.5-hour day, and nurses, that's what the cost there would be for that. That's these two here, the Wimmer lease at 136. Now, we've talked a number of times about buying a property and leasing a property, and our buses now are on Route 11 in the old Wimmer property there, and we're using that. We're going to rent that. We have spoke to Charlie Wimmer. We could get into a lease there for the next couple of years, but that money we've been using to pay for that lease has been through ESSERS funds, so now it'll have to be budgeted amount. And we're going to consolidate what we're currently spending and storing at the Scattergood property, which is off of North Franklin down there, and it's actually going to be a savings, but we were using ESSERS money. This is much less than it would be to do the 2 rentals that we're doing now. Transportation, maintenance, and parts, again, we have to make sure we have the supplies and things that are needed there. Increase in utilities for $500,000, increase in custodial supplies, operations equipment, and then as instructional supplies, materials, and things. Again, last year, we put a freeze on all of that because we didn't get the increase that we had asked for. And then the Virtual Virginia program, which some of our students are attending, not a large number are attending full-time, but we do have a large number of students that are taking extra courses that we don't offer through that, and that was funded through ESSERS, and we would include that in the budget moving forward. So if you look at the aggregate, last year's total was $134 million, approximately $134,940,000. The ask we're using this year is $147,383. It's about a $5 million, $5.4 million increase in state aid. Federal revenues, this is kind of incidental revenue that we get from local. So the ask from the county would be $58,400,000, and that would be what would have to go right there. That would be the increase from here from last year. Dr. Whitaker?
Next, you see our school nutrition fund. As you know, our school nutrition fund is a separate account. And so the increase, you can see here between the current year and next year, we're proposing to move to 5.6 in that budget. You can see on the left there, those proposed meal rates for next year. We found these numbers by working with Michelle Knotts and looking at the number of meals we're serving this year to estimate out where we feel we would be for next school year. Again, the school nutrition fund is separate from the operating fund, so sometimes you will see numbers listed differently. When you receive the superintendent's statement of need book that we're going to give you here in a few minutes, that might be something you note as you look through it. If it says operating budget, that's not going to include the school nutrition fund. But if it says the entire budget, both of them, then that would have those numbers there together. Moving forward, this month we're doing our superintendent's statement of need presentation. On the 6th, we'll come back to you again to ask you to approve the school board funding request and address any questions you may have. On February 26th, we are to present the school board's funding request to the Board of Supervisors at their meeting. They will hold a public hearing for their budget adoption on April 9th. I apologize, and then do their public hearing on the 16th. And then on May 7th, we would approve our final annual budget. It is important, as a reminder, to know these numbers change. So right now, we are functioning on the governor's proposed budget. However, that usually changes from what we know now to what we actually find out in March, April, May, sometimes June, sometimes we get updated information in September. So we can only provide you the information that we have at that time. But as soon as there is a budget approved for the Commonwealth, we would update any of the information that we have and provide that to you. We're happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, so I have been saying this for several years. The presentation that we have received tonight is not a detailed presentation that shows us the line by line of what we are spending as a school district for we as a board to be able to question different areas of the budget and the costs for things and where we as a board would maybe like to see needs adjusted. So I appreciate the increase for our custodians and aides to a minimum of $15. But for me, that questions employees who have been working for the district for many, many years, and now the salary of a starting employee will be the same as someone who's been here for many years, unless you can tell me that there is a scale where our employees have been compensated for their service throughout the years already. And I'll have more comments about our paying the amount of pay that we're paying some folks who are willing to come in and help clean our buildings versus our custodians who are already doing the work. So I have some concerns about how that's being done. And when we're talking about bonuses, no matter where they come from, they sound great, but when it comes to the impact on the wages for our employees, it does not compound, so your wages still stay stagnant to a certain degree. So I have a lot of questions, and we were just handed this, so didn't have any material to go over before the meeting tonight. So those are just questions off the top of my head for right now. But I do believe as a board, it is our responsibility to look at a more detailed budget and to be able to have those discussions as a board. And as of right now, it looks like at our next board meeting, let me see that calendar, we are going to be asked to approve a budget that we have had very little input on as a board.
I'm going to say that I agree with Ms. Franklin. If my memory serves me right, in Linwood, I think you were here during budget season last year. I want to say, and I understand that we do have 3 new board members, and it is a new board. However, I know that the 4 of us that are left, I do believe that there was a shared concern about possibly seeing more information. And I want to say that I think, Ms. Franklin, we did put in the request for a line-by-line budget item just because it gave more transparency and it gave more information. Since we are voting on this and we do have the final say, I appreciate all the work that has gone into the presentation, of course, but I don't feel like it goes deep enough because we get asked questions and I think of questions later, and sometimes if things aren't broken down more, things can get overlooked, not thought about, and things like that. So I would say that I would have to be in favor before I am able to approve a budget, that I would have to have more specifics and a line-by-line budget item that gives more in-depth into the budget and what we're spending our money on.
I'd like to echo the concerns and the feedback that you've gotten from some of my fellow board members. I appreciate very much the work that's gone into this budget. I am a little surprised to be getting a detailed report in the middle of a meeting rather than prior to a meeting to be able to ask more informed questions. And so I would also like to see a more detailed budget. One of the concerns that I have is that we saw a significant reduction due to the decisions made by the Board of Supervisors. I know that what that's translated into, for instance, a curtailment in extracurricular activities. So are those being restored, those funds being restored, and how they are? So it's hard to make an assessment on the current budget if I don't know more about how it relates to the impact of the previous budget. And I think having more detail in the budget would allow us to evaluate that. And one final point, we know that retention is an issue, and I'm thrilled to see that you're increasing the base pay to 15. I think that just makes a whole lot of sense. In academia and higher ed, we talk about the issue of compression. I don't know if that's a term that you use, but I would like to see the division have a program to address what Ms. Franklin has talked about, that there are employees who've been working here for decades who may be making just a few dollars more. And I'd like to see an actual plan to both study that issue and address it in a comprehensive and transparent way. But I do appreciate so much of the work that's gone into this budget and what's in it. I'd just like to make sure that that's addressed in this budget and future budgets. Thanks.
I have a question about the school buses. I remember when we got the group that came in and told us that we needed to do 8 buses a year, and I think we have since then, which has been quite a long time. And mind you, I know that that's how you stay up on top of things. But is there a way we can assess the buses that we have at this point, and if we need 6, or we look at getting 6 this year instead of 8? Because I've just spoke with some of the grounds equipment, and I mean, people and some of those areas haven't had new equipment in years and years and years and years and years. And I understand the bus situation, and that carries our children, and they're precious. But, is there a way of us looking at going, hey, I think this year we could do, and I'm just throwing out I'm not saying that nobody else even thinks this way, but, if we just need 6 buses, like I said, and take that 2 buses and put toward equipment for different areas of the county that haven't been able to get anything to help with their jobs as well. And if we need 8 and we're looking at absolutely 8, then I get it. But that was a recommendation by a group that came in. So, and I do think that's what keeps our fleet on top of things. But, we know even in our home vehicles, hey, yeah, generally that might be the case. But this year it looks like our vehicle's doing okay. So I think we can go another year. I'd like to look at that if that was a possibility to kind of, gauge. And that might be some funding that we could find to buy some other equipment for other parts of the county.
Yeah, and to echo many of your statements, receiving a 53-page detailed budget in the middle of a meeting where we're supposed to vote in the next meeting to approve it, it doesn't leave us any time for discussion to make changes for the voted on budget. Additionally, to Ms. Bond's point, there's other places where maintenance material is needed as well that I don't see on here. Compressors for air conditioners in our systems. The compressor goes out. I've been working in the in industry, getting equipment. Lead times are not what they were 4 years ago. You're going to be looking at months, 20 weeks, something like that, probably, to get a new compressor, if those aren't already in stock with our system. So getting those kinds of updates as well would be nice here.
Would that fall under capital, or is that?
So it depends on the cost, you know,
Okay.
if things are over $5,000, then they can
Okay.
typically fall under capital. And I've just been
That's just-
listening, I'm happy to address, and I know Dr. Reagan is as well, some of the questions and things that you have.
I think what I've heard from at least the majority of the board members is you'd like a detailed line item budget, and we could share that via some type of spreadsheet sooner than later. Obviously, we have that because we have what the increases would be for the totals for those areas. So that's something we could definitely share with all of you, help give you more information so that be more transparent with any questions you may have. I understand that.
I think too, something we can recommend is when we approve the budget calendar for next year, adding in the dates and the items that you want so that we can get them to, you know, we got our worksheet on January 4th. So we try to move very, very quickly, but it's hard for us to act before we get the information. So we've spent just about every hour that we can on it, but we always want to do a better job. I think historically, the statement of needs, and, you know, everything can change, but I think has been in place in this division for the superintendent to have an opportunity to share that information all at once. But we could certainly try to adjust it. You know, I think it would also be important to add in extra dates, because again, those dates kind of have to come after we know what we're getting and what we're looking at. But we can at any time assess and evaluate and answer budget questions that you have. We could have smaller work sessions, you know, throughout the year, because there are so many lines to look at that we could certainly provide any opportunities to have those work sessions, to maybe come in and do it as chunks throughout the year instead of waiting until the end. So we're happy to bring those recommendations forward to you. I didn't get a note on everybody's comments, but we're certainly happy to look into those. Ms. Bond, we didn't buy buses this year, but I certainly understand where you're coming from. The standard is a 15-year replacement cycle, and so to stay on top of that cycle, that was what was recommended. As you could see, we were looking at actually increasing that, but we didn't buy the buses last year, and so we kind of do need to put the funds into it for this year. We tried to get it through capital from the Board of Supervisors, and we're not able to get that because it's really not a one-time only purchase. You have to replace them, and so they prefer to not do it in that way. But we are absolutely willing to do whatever we can to get you the information that you need. I know the book is very detailed. We do try to get as much as we can in there, but unfortunately, a lot of it we just can't update till we get the information from them. Usually we get it before we go home for Christmas as a gift, the last day. But they waited and gave it to us January 4th this year, which pushed our time back a little bit as well. But I do understand. I can guarantee you, as we were getting them hot off the press, it feels like we should have been able to have it to you in advance. So we'll do our best to do that moving forward.
Okay, so
Can I ask,
for several years, when our budgets start going to a format like this, and it was like, okay, here's what we need, and we as a board don't have a line-by-line budget to ask questions about different areas of the budget, different positions in the budget, and even an interim superintendent at one point worked with us to give us a more detailed budget so that we could be more informed about the funds within the district. And then things went right back to this format. Because it's just easier. It's not as much work for the board, not as many meetings, because our calendar used to have several dates in there for us to have additional meetings to work on our budget and for the board to start prioritizing where they wanted funds to go with the recommendations and stuff from administration to build a board budget. So I don't know what the difference in things are right now, but we have got to get back to seeing exactly what's going on in this district and how much we're paying, because to Mr. Gentry's comments about positions being cut and where are they coming back, how are they being filled, you know, those are questions that need to be answered during this budget cycle.
Can I ask a
I'd like to
question?
comment on Ms. Franklin's comment. You know, I came in last year, as you all remember, in December, so we didn't really have a lot of time, hit the ground running, and we're kind of in the same process as we are this year. But where I came from, we would have finance committee meetings and other meetings that were dedicated solely to budget development, budget conversation with school board members. So I don't know if you all have ever done that, or have a special meeting between now and we have to present this to the Board of Supervisors, or when we have to vote on it, that's just dedicated to the budget. That's the only item on the agenda, and we talk about every item. In my mind, that makes sense, but I don't know. Ms. Franklin, you've been here for a while. Have you guys done that in the past?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Ms. Bond will contest. We
We
would
used to
sometimes
take
have
one
at least
line at a
three.
time and
Yeah.
hit every one and have a discussion about every line item.
Seems like maybe that's what we need to do between now and whenever we need to present it to you all again.
Yeah, that's my question. Would you mind, Ms. Whitaker, Dr. Whitaker, bringing up the slide with the schedule? How are we going to readjust the schedule? Because we don't want to just move forward with this existing schedule, given all the comments that have been made here. So is there a way for, will you be updating this schedule to allow for, or are we just moving forward with this schedule?
We can add dates between now and the 26th, but we have to present to the Board of the Supervisors. We actually moved it from the 12th to the 26th of February, so that's where they're expecting the budget from us. So it's, as you see, it's a very short window between when we get it and when we have to give it to them. But we can absolutely add any meetings in between that you all would like for us to work on that, and we'll work diligently to get the information for you.
So
do
the
we
6th
have
could
to-
move, but the 26th is kind of locked in.
Yes. As I said, the 12th was the day that had been slated for us to go, and we were presenting to them on the 26th. Also, keeping in mind, after that date, we can continue to meet, because it's a request at that point. We still won't know what we're getting. You know, we build this budget, and we spend a lot of time preparing for the January and February dates that we have to move forward. But until something is determined at the state level, we're still guesstimating based upon that proposed budget. So there is a lot more opportunity than perhaps it seems. You know, we put that request forward. We can make amendments to that and continue to work after those dates if that is what you all would like to do as well. It's just we have to bring it to them because of their budget calendar so that they can continue to move forward. They kind of decide how much they're going to give us, and then what typically happens is we come back, you know, if they give us everything we asked for, then we're able to move forward. In my experience here, you know, we've had to come back and cut. And so there's still work that happens after that date, once they decide upon what they're going to fund.
And that's true, but for me as a board member, and again, I've been saying this for several years now, when we present a budget to the supervisors, it should be one that we have worked on, not just been presented. And so that what is being presented to them is what the board feels the request should be. And I believe it should be sometimes much more than just needs, because our needs usually kind of fit into the minimum we can kind of squeeze by and not make people feel uncomfortable. And sometimes we got to feel uncomfortable to keep things moving forward.
If we just look at our present calendar, I mean, we have another meeting on the 20th as well. So even if you wanted to use February 6th, the bulk of that time, before, after, whenever our normal meeting is to work on the budget, or sometime in between there, push that vote to the 20th without rescheduling an additional meeting, it's still within the timeline that's prescribed for the Board of Supervisors and gives you all the opportunity to do it exactly what you mentioned that you would like to do.
Yes.
Has there ever been an effort in the budget development process to do some projections for years beyond? Obviously, not anything that would be locked in. And Dr. Whitaker said several times, and I and I agree. Like, things change. You don't always know that you may have to allocate more to something unexpected. But the components of a school system don't necessarily change all that radically, and I don't know if that's that might be a process to consider going forward. And this budget, just to clarify, represents absorbing the loss of the ESSERS funds and the reduction that you had to deal with last year based on Board of Supervisors funding. This is kind of putting that money back, which is why there's it's almost 10% more than what you dealt with this past fiscal year. Okay.
That's great. And Mr. Purcell, on the projections, one of the things, we do have a demographic study that's not ready for being presented yet, but I do plan to present that in the near future too. That'll give us projections for 5 and 10 years out for the division, growth and decline in some areas, as well as by strand and by school as well. So I think that's really helpful in planning. And I know one of the topics for the joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors on January 29th, I think it is the capital plans long-term for financing and when those bonds come due and what availability we would have to long-term plan on what schools are next to renovate and what the needs would be. So I know that multi-year kind of idea, looking forward projections, is planned at least for that meeting as well.
Great.
I had a question for clarity on slide 9 of your presentation.
I can't see the numbers, do you know which one?
Teachers, yep. Okay, so the Montgomery County number here is including the 5% increase? Or this is the current year?
This is current.
Okay, and so that's all current years across
Yeah.
there. Okay, thank you.
Great, yeah, I was saving my comments for the end, but I definitely agree with the board's general consensus there of wanting additional information. I had some specific questions, but I think, definitely in agreement, we need to have more robust and detailed conversations to dig into some of these numbers. I guess, so 2 requests I guess I would make along those lines as we prepare for future conversations. As it was touched on, a couple of these items that are listed are cases where things were covered by ESSER and now no longer are, like the First of Virginia, a couple other places were noted. I'm assuming there are positions that were also covered by ESSER, that funding would also be running out, and we need to make decisions about that. Is that factored in here, or are you expecting to?
It is, and either those positions were absorbed into our current budget, or they were eliminated as, being not needed. But that's something we could definitely share. What were those positions? What were they over time? Last year, some of those positions, we looked at taking away from our budget as too, because we knew you would get to that fiscal cliff when all of a sudden ESSER's money was done, which is, the year moving forward. So we could definitely share that information, what positions were funded exclusively by ESSER's, and, where are we now? There were some reductions last year, as you all know about that. And then what would that look like moving forward? So then you could weigh in on what your thoughts are on those.
Great, thank you. And as we think about kind of getting into more detail here, I definitely agree with everyone's comments on that, but at least for me, I would assume the board feels the same way. I'd like more detail not only on the additions that you're showing, but that top line 134,940, right? Like each year, we kind of build upon the last year's budget, and we get we get detail on the new stuff, but not always as much detail was already there, right? So I think we need some visibility into what we're starting with as well, in order to make sure we're at the right starting number before we add on top of it, right? Okay.
So just to summarize, I think I have everyone's understanding. Our first initial charge is to get the entire school board a line item budget, digest, look at, and then we will either through the chair or talk about when we want to schedule a meeting, whether we want to use the 6th meeting or something in between, or something between the 6th and the 20th, to have at least another meeting to really delve into it. Is that fair?
My preference, I don't want to speak for the board. We can have this conversation now if you want, or we can work it offline, but my preference would be to have a dedicated meeting for the budget and not tie up a business meeting where we're going to have other stuff we're going to have to do anyway, right? So that's probably going to mean adding an additional meeting, unplanned meeting to our schedule, but I think that's important, so. I'm seeing a bunch of head nods.
The 30th may be an availability too, because we have an additional week. Kind of, you know, there's another Monday before the next one, so that would be available as too.
30th of
January. This is a 5 Tuesday month. I mean, you all can decide that. We can talk about that later if you want. Pick that date. We're at the
You have the joint
29th. The
meeting on-
29th is the joint meeting.
So my experience has been when we're looking at a line budget and board members are having discussion and asking questions, there's at least one meeting where that happens, and then another meeting where those answers are given to us, the adjustments and how it affects the budget, before we would go into to approving a budget. So quite frankly, I believe we need to have 2 more meetings.
We'll, if it's okay with the board, we'll have some conversation offline about how we want to kind of incorporate that into our schedule. Propose some dates and check on availability. Okay? Great discussion, though. Anything else on the budget before we move on?
Thanks
Clearly,
for
we're
the
going to have a lot more conversation around that, so we're not done yet. All right. As if that wasn't exciting enough, the next item on our agenda is the school calendar proposal.
Ask Dr. Widener to make the presentation on what her team worked on.
Good evening, Chair Hudson, school board members, Dr. Bragan. I'm here tonight to present a draft of a school calendar for 24-25. The draft that I'm presenting to you is the result of a collective effort from our calendar committee. Calendar committee is one of the superintendent's advisory committees, and so this process began with this committee where we met last semester on several occasions to develop an initial draft. And in developing a draft, we did look as far out as 3 years. However, the draft we're presenting to you tonight just includes a draft for next year. I just want to note that the calendar committee did include representatives from different segments of our constituents. So there were 11 representatives on the committee. These individuals were parents, some were teachers, and some were administrators, and there were several who covered more than one category. We also had all 4 of our communities represented on the calendar committee. And as I said, we met 3 times last semester. We went back and looked at historically what has been done in our calendars in previous years. We were given some parameters by Dr. Bragan. I will say that one of our primary goals was to look at our school calendar and develop a proposed calendar that has more instructional days in it. And I'll talk about the reasons for that in just a minute. But we also took into consideration a lot of other things. And having a wide variety of members on the committee provided different perspectives and really kind of gave us an understanding of different needs. So once we were able to come up with a draft that we presented to Dr. Bragan did review that draft, and he did share it with other employee groups from the school division. And we did get feedback from those groups. So based on the feedback that we received from those groups, there were some additional revisions that were made to the calendar draft, and those are reflected in the calendar that has been presented to you. I just want to take this opportunity to thank the members who volunteered to be on this committee. They are listed here. So Catherine Davis, who is both a parent and also a high school teacher at Blacksburg High School. Laura Funk, who is a parent and elementary teacher at Auburn Elementary. Megan Hawley is our assistant principal at Auburn Elementary School. Danny Knott is the principal at Christiansburg Middle School. Todd Lewis is our principal at Eastern Montgomery High School. Joey Lyons is a Christiansburg parent. Sarah Price is a Blacksburg parent. Adam Simpson is our Director of Secondary Education, and he is also an elementary parent. Steve Sizemore is our Director of Elementary Education, and Barbara Valentine is an elementary teacher at Christiansburg Primary School. And then I chaired this committee representing the school board office, but I am also the parent of 2 high school children. So again, I want to go back and talk about one of our focus areas, which was the idea of building more instructional time into our calendar. Our current calendar for this year has 173 instructional days for students. Last year, our previous calendar had 172 days. Those are fewer days than we have had in previous calendars. The state requires us to have either 180 school days, or we can base it on 990 hours. And our school day currently has 6 instructional hours. So for the last 2 years, we've had fewer days than we have in the past, but also our current calendars do have fewer instructional days than many other school divisions in our region. When we look at student achievement, and Dr. Wickham shared in detail our student achievement from this year compared to previous years, and I'm going to show you a slide in just a minute. We know that COVID certainly had an impact, and there was certainly learning loss. And we are doing many things to try to mitigate and work through that, whether it's our extensive all-in tutoring program, whether it's extensive efforts to provide intervention in the classroom. But we know that there's compelling research that shows that increasing instructional time does lead to increased academic achievement. And so I'll show you a slide in a minute that just kind of shows our student achievement over the last 5 years, and to me really indicates a need of why we need to build more instructional time into our calendar. We feel that doing that would support our efforts to improve the academic achievement of all students. So again, this is similar data that was shared earlier this fall, but this shows our reading, math, and science SOL pass scores, and this is for all students in reading, math, and science. So 2018, 2019, that's pre-COVID. You can see our achievement rates are in the 80s. We didn't have any data during 2019-20, the height of COVID. And in the years that follow, you can see the dip in those achievement scores. And while we've made some improvement, we still are not where we were prior to COVID. And again, we've put a lot of things in place to try to mitigate and meet those challenges. But we do believe that building more instructional time into the calendar would help us in those efforts. So I do want to give you an overview of just some of the things that are in this calendar. So this calendar does increase the instructional time. We would go from, like I said, this current calendar we're in this year has 173 instructional days. So we've added 4 additional school days for students. So it does increase the instructional time. There are 188 days for teachers. So that includes the 170 that the students are there, plus 11 teacher work days or professional development days. And then we've noted 12 unassigned work days. The reason that we put those in is that teachers on a 10-month contract are contracted to work 200 days. However, we don't require that they are in the building on all those days, so we have built-in time that provides flexibility, and those are what we call the 12 unassigned work days. We also have specific holidays and breaks, and those do align with policy that requires many of those holidays, so again, you'll see those in the calendar. I now want to go through and kind of highlight some of the key things that you're going to see in each semester. So we divide our calendar into 2 semesters. The first semester from August to December, and the second semester is January to the end of May. One of the changes we did put in the calendar, and this was in an effort to build in more instructional time, was starting school just a little bit earlier. Typically, we've been starting school on the 2nd Wednesday in August. So we did, as a committee, we had a great deal of discussion around this, and we agreed that one way to add a day in would be starting school on Tuesday. the committee was, I think, in agreement that starting on Monday would be very challenging. I think people appreciate coming off of summer. It takes some time to build up stamina to get used to going back to a full week right away. But we did feel that we could start on a Tuesday. So the first day of school is Tuesday, August 13th. Teachers would still continue to have 5 required work days before school starts. That is not a change to the calendar. We still would recognize Labor Day, which is actually required by policy, so that is one of the holidays early on in the semester. We did take out 1 teacher workday that is currently in this current calendar for September. So there was the removal of a teacher workday in September. So that's where we gained another day of instruction back. We had a lot of discussion around the need for a fall break. So historically in previous years, there were 2 years where we did have a fall break. In our discussions with not just the staff on the committee, but the parents offered this sentiment as well, is that it's a long stretch between Labor Day and Thanksgiving. There really isn't a whole lot of break in there. And so that can be stressful for both students and staff. So there was a lot of discussion around the value of adding a fall break. During October is a long month. October is also where we have the end of Q1 and the beginning of Q2. So again, there's kind of a natural transition there. So we'd agreed that we would want to build in 2 days for a break, 2 for students, and one of those days would be a work day for staff that would help them tie up the first quarter, and then it would be followed by a holiday. We looked at different times at where we could put this in, and one of the changes we made after getting feedback from staff is that historically we almost always have an early release day that aligns with Virginia Tech's Thursday night football game. We have a need to have an early release for transportation reasons. And early releases bring all kinds of challenges. So the idea was, rather than having to plan an early release day, let's make that part of fall break. And so that Thursday would be a work day for staff, and then Friday, students would be off Thursday, and then everybody would be off on Friday. And as it turns out, the date I put in the calendar, I just saw it today, it looks like Virginia Tech has posted the Thursday night game, and it is in fact on October 17th, so that will actually work out nicely. November is very similar to what it has been. So schools are closed on Election Day. So again, that's a work day for staff, but that is a day off for students. And then Thanksgiving break, I think there's general agreement that we appreciate having 3 full days for Thanksgiving break. We did have some discussion of going back to making that an early release day, but I think ultimately that will only result in probably a high number of student absences. So with that, the first semester ends on Friday, December 20th. It's nice to be able to close out the semester before winter break. It gives us 87 days in semester 1. And then with winter break beginning the following week, there are 8 days in that winter break for staff and 10 days for students. So that's kind of an overview of what the first semester looks like. The second semester starts in January, so we've left in, as we've done historically, 2 teacher work days or PD days in January. So teachers would come back 2 days before students. That is a Thursday, Friday, and students come back on a Monday. Historically and by policy, we always recognize Martin Luther King Day as well as President's Day. So that's one holiday in January, one holiday in February. This calendar does not have any work days in February. However, there is no conclusion of a quarter or a marking period in February. One of the things we did look at was discussion around the idea of implementing a full week of spring break. We've heard a lot of input from parents and even staff that have said it would be really nice if we could have a full week of spring break. It would provide the opportunity for people to be able to plan things. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm around this idea, but then there was discussion about the best place to put it. Historically, we have always given off the Friday before Easter, Good Friday, and the Monday, and made that part of a shorter break. There's actually a more natural place for a spring break in March, because the third quarter ends in March. That's kind of, we kind of conclude a marking period. Teachers need some time to wrap that up. March, again, is a long month. And it's also further away from our end-of-year testing. One of the challenges in putting a long spring break around Easter is that if Easter occurs in April, April is around the time where we're getting ready for students to embark on a lot of testing, testing like end-of-course SOL tests, AP tests, DE tests. And so there was some concern about the impact on instruction if we had a full week of spring break that occurred in mid to late April. So March seemed like a more natural place to put it because it was further away from testing, and it also falls right between quarter 3 and quarter 4. And then we built a workday in on that Monday for teachers, so they would still have dedicated time to close out the marking period. We did leave in, because it's always been in there historically, 2 days off around the Easter weekend, so Good Friday and Easter Monday, those still are holidays. We have the semester ending before Memorial Day. We did put graduation weekend in as May 16th and 18th. However, I understand there may be a little bit of a challenge there because for some reason Virginia Tech has announced that their graduation next year is later. This year it's May 8th, but next year it will be Friday, May 16th. So that may be something we have to assess and look at. I think it would be challenging to make it a week earlier. That would really mean that seniors would have to be done with classes by May 2nd. That's very early. If we did it the following weekend, that's after school is over. So that may be something you want to discuss. But the school year has a nice ending. It ends on a Friday, right before Memorial Day weekend, and that gives us 90 days in the school calendar. So the semesters are relatively close in terms of their length. And there is one teacher workday at the end of the year. So those are the drafts. Ms. Osborne, would you mind clicking on that link and pulling up the calendar so they can see it? And again, this was all shared out, but we can kind of go through. That just gives you a visual of what the days look like, where they are. You can see the work days for teachers are in the darker green. The holidays are designated in red. We do have the parent-teacher conference weeks in the calendar, as we've historically had. That's just a week dedicated for parent-teacher conferences at the conclusion of quarter 1 and the conclusion of quarter 3. So what questions can I answer?
I have a few.
Okay.
Just to clarify, and thank you for the information in the presentation. It was very well put together, so I really appreciate that. And everybody's time and input on the calendar. I know that's a very touchy subject, and everybody thinks differently, so I know that's a difficult task. So just to clarify, usually we get the previous year or two's calendar along with the calendar that's being proposed. Is there any reason we didn't get that this year, just to show changes or any differences from before?
I apologize for that. I'm new
It's
to this
okay.
process, so I didn't think to do that. I
Okay.
tried to explain the changes in the presentation.
Okay,
so.
that's no problem. I just know that we've usually, when I've opened it, we've had a couple. This was last year's, and then it showed the calendar proposed and then the changes on the count, what those differences.
That was my oversight, Ms.
No,
Barton. I apologize.
I totally get it, So, and I just wanted to clarify too, on a couple of the breaks, you mentioned that, I believe on the Christmas break, I think you said, was it 10 days for students? Right?
Yes, not including the weekends.
Okay, but we've got 2 teacher work days in there, and students don't go to school on teacher work days, right?
Right.
So that's really 12 days.
So if you look at the calendar in December, so the red are the days that everybody's off. So the teachers are off the 23rd to the 27th. That's 5. 30th and 31st would be 7. Ms. Osborne, can you scroll up to January? And then 8 is January 1st. So those are the 8 days that the staff are off for. The students are off the 2nd and the 3rd because those are teacher work days.
Okay, so added into the previous one, so if you're counting total weekdays as far as school days, and count the teacher work days because that's a non-instructional day for the kids, so that would really be 12 days that the kids would be off? What am I not getting?
It's confusing because there's 2 white cells that are colored red. That Monday and Tuesday should be
so-
white.
From the month before.
So the colors are overlapping?
Yes,
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
those are
That's
still
why
the
I
same.
asked, because when you said that, I was I just wanted to make sure I was looking at it right. So thanks for the clarification on that, because I thought, am I seeing things or what's going on? So thank you for the clarification on that. I do want to mention that I'm going to be the bad guy, and I am going to say that I am all about 180 days. I voted for the kids to be back in school because they need more time in the classroom, and I think I made the right decision when I did that. So I still think we need more time in the classroom. So not to say that people don't deserve breaks and holidays, and I'm all about that, and work days, but I'm a stickler on more instructional days for our children. That's why I'm on the board, and that's who my priority is. Not to say that I can't be convinced otherwise, but I'm just going ahead and throwing that out there, and that's just my personal feeling. I do also want to mention to the board that I have had a couple people on the calendar committee reach out to me and say that the calendar that we're being shown proposed tonight was not the calendar that they approved. And I had one of them in particular, who was actually a parent from my district and was a previous school board member, call me and tell me he was going to come tonight and told me to let the board know that the reason he wasn't here, and his name is Joey Lyons, and I had permission to use his name, was that he has been on the calendar committee before, so he's very used to how the committee works. He's a parent, he has 2 kids in the school system. He knows a lot about education, and he said that he wanted to have a face here for the calendar committee because he was excited about it being presented. When he saw that what his committee proposed and approved was not what was shown, that he wanted the board to know that that's why he wasn't here tonight. So when you say we had different committees, we had employee groups that went in after the calendar committee and looked at things and changed it, can you tell me who these groups are and why these changes weren't brought back to the committee for a final approval before it was brought to us?
I could speak to that. Again, that's my fault, Ms. Barton, not Dr. Widener's fault. When I got the calendar, I took a look at it. I shared it with some employee groups, shared it with some of the MCA leadership, asked them to get feedback from them as well. And I did speak to a number of other people in the community, got some input, and thought this was the calendar that we could achieve, move towards what you said about 180 days. That's been my goal as well. Right now, this year's calendar is 173. This calendar is presented as 177. It's not quite 180, but it's a move in that direction. And that was a thought that we could transition and kind of get one step closer to where we want to be. But that's my fault, and I'll reach out to Mr. Lyons too, because I can understand his frustration if after they had a committee and they thought that was a set deal and that's what they were used to in the past. That's totally my fault, and I will own that, and I will speak to Mr. Lyons.
And like I said, he was very excited about it, and he did share with me that the committee did, in fact, want the 180 days. And he also shared with me that when the changes were brought back, when some of them found out what some of the changes were because they weren't initially told, they had to ask, that they were not in favor of it. So I just wanted to give the board that information.
I'm going to sound like a bad guy too, because I'm going to make a comment. For years, the spring break thing has kind of crept up, and we did that years ago, and it was a disaster. And, I know that was passed and it can move forward, but in March, 9 times out of 10, the weather's not that great. If I remember right, there wasn't anything, unless you are an educator or can work from home, those are the only people that having children out at that time benefits. Having a business that people have to bring their children to their job because they don't have daycare 10 and 12 days already, it's tough for businesses. So I'm speaking out for parents that don't have help and businesses that, have to work with their employees, and they're shorthanded as it is because there's not enough daycare. And I cannot and will not vote for a calendar with a full week of spring break in March. We don't have 1 month that students go all month without some sort of day or day off. There's not 1 month. And and going back a day or two early, that's the one thing I do hear parents fuss about continuously, going back so early. We're already getting out May 23rd as it is too. So the summer breaks are nice and long. It's not like we don't have time there. And we do have great holiday, like I said, it puts a real hardship. And I'm not saying schools are looked at as daycare, but schools are what we lawfully do with our students. So, and we educate our students, and that's what our job is. And I think, I personally just can't vote for the calendar with having a week spring break. I can't do it.
Okay, so I have a question about the committee and how it's staffed. I appreciate folks who step up and do these sometimes thankless positions, but how was the committee staffed? How was that happening?
So there were surveys that went out earlier this year that asked for people's interest in serving on our different advisory committees. And so that this was based on interest that was received.
I don't mean anything to be disrespectful to our staff who stepped up to be on the committee, but I do have a concern that folks who are so connected with the school system are also considered as parents when it comes to input with the committee. Because going to Mrs. Bond's and probably Mrs. Parton's comments, you may lean more toward my responsibility or my duties or my world as an educator versus a parent who is not in that field, and how it affects so many parents in the county. So for me to have more input from parents like Mr. Lyons and Ms. Price, I think is desperately needed on the committee. So when it comes to the 180 days, I am not opposed to our students getting, in fact, I'm for all year-round school, right? Maybe we should look into some of that. But when we look at the learning loss, yeah, COVID had a huge impact on that. And quite frankly, if folks really believe we're gonna come back from some of that loss in a couple of years, it's not that much of reality, especially when we have to deal with some of the cuts that we have over the last couple of years. But there are other factors in our schools that cause distractions, that our students may not be getting, that even if they're there 200 days, may not be getting the instruction, the quality of instruction, because they're so distracted. And I think this has come up several times, and I have brought it up, and that is the cell phones, because it's a constant. Everybody, even adults, can't seem to put them down long enough to concentrate on some of the tasks we're supposed to be doing when we're doing them. So I think that is another way we might increase our instruction in the classrooms, is to take a serious look at our cell phone policy and any other distractions that are in our classrooms that don't need to be there. So you mentioned the superintendent's parameters, but in the past, school board had parameters that they also wanted to be considered when the calendar is being developed. And I look back 2 years ago, because we did a 2-year, calendar, and yeah, the perimeters were there. So as a board, again, this is something we have to approve, and we should have some say into what we might want as perimeters. They may match the superintendent's, but there needs to be a discussion by the board as far as how the calendar is developed.
Can I ask a question, a couple of questions? But first, I want to thank the committee for its work. I don't know, as a new board member, what the relationship is or expectations of the committee. If the expectation of the committee is that the calendar that they work on is the one that will be approved, because I think in reference to your question, it seems that there's an assumption that the school board doesn't actually have a say in the calendar, but just approves what the committee. Is that accurate, or is it the expectation of the committee that they propose a calendar, but then it does go to stakeholders, including the school board, for input? Is that accurate or not?
My understanding is that as part of the process, it is shared with other groups and stakeholders.
Okay.
So what we bring to you is just a draft, and that draft is certainly subject to change.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. So I know that there was a survey, an MCA survey, based on that original proposed calendar. And I've heard a few things. One is I heard parents begging for a week long for spring break, and also that teachers wanted it as well. I also have heard concern about teacher work days. And I've heard conflicting information from teachers and staff about those work days. That were some were, I want to optimize instructional time, and they weren't calling for more, but particularly at the primary level, I've heard from teachers who want more. And so one of the questions, and I would love actually if we have a rep from the MCA, if I could ask a question, because there's a balancing act here, which is you could take away a day or two from spring break and say add a work day in, is it January or February where one was taken away? February. So I know that there were priorities in that survey that I think maybe can help us understand how much of a priority it is for teachers and for employees to have that week off. So would they be willing, for instance, to give up one of those days from spring break in order to add one of those teacher work days? Would it be possible to ask, because we don't have access to that survey, but I think some of these questions were asked on the survey. Is it possible to get some input from the MCA rep here, or is that inappropriate?
I don't know if you need that, Dr. Gucci, because I have the results, if you'd like me to share the top 3 requests that were shared from that survey.
I'd like to hear from the MCA. I know that they're not in control, just because I would like that, but I'm not the final say here on that question.
Board, I'm not sure if it's appropriate or not to call up folks not.
Well, for me, I don't think that's an unfair thing when you don't have a parent, because this calendar affects everybody, not just staff. It affects students, it affects parents, it affects grandparents, and, families that are raising children. To me, unless you can have a representation from all groups, I don't think it's fair to let one speak out on what they think is right. Because like I said, the calendar affects everyone.
But correct me if I'm wrong, changing spring break would allow for another teacher workday. It wouldn't change, would it?
We haven't voted in spring break yet. That's just a proposal. We've not ever had it before.
But spring break's followed by a teacher workday too.
That's something else I was not okay with.
There's a teacher workday right after spring break.
Well, if there's not consensus for that, the one thing I would suggest is, I don't know if it's possible to have a follow-up conversation about the secondary calendar, because one of the things that I've heard is, I agree, we need to have more instructional time, but one way of doing that is to maybe not make Bruin block 5 days a week, because I heard an estimate that consumes 2 weeks of instructional time by having it every day. So I wonder if there's a way to increase instructional time by looking at the block scheduling, Bruin block, that might help with some of these concerns.
We could share that discussion with the secondary people, but I don't know if that's, I hear the tangential connection to the calendar, but that's something separate, I think, if we're looking towards more of a dedicated block schedule or something like that.
Well, and I just want to throw in there too, and I'm sorry, I know I've already spoken, and I know some board members haven't had a chance to say anything yet, but, the main thing of the calendar is the educational piece, and we do want our kids in the classroom for instruction as much as possible. But we've also got to realize when there's no school day, we're talking about food for kids, we're talking about home lives for kids, we're talking about the after-school tutoring for kids to help them get caught up. It affects so many things other than just the in the classroom instructional piece. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that, and that's some of the things that we need to kind of keep in mind when we are doing this calendar. And I'm not real sure why we have to worry about following Virginia Tech's schedule, because I know Tech is a huge employer, and I get it, and I know a lot of our parents work at Tech, but I'm not sure why we feel the need to schedule our breaks and our days off due to it, to make sure people don't have to come into work after a Tech sporting event or have the same spring break week, because not everybody works at Tech. Not everybody can take a Monday through a Friday off. And don't get me wrong, I'm all about a break. I know everybody needs a break, and I'm not against a break. But what I'm not okay with is a Monday through Friday. These are high school kids, they're not college students. The spring break is longer than what my daughter gets, and she's a college student. It's ridiculous. So I don't mind a day here and there with a weekend tied in to make it a total of that many days, but I think taking a Monday through Friday and then adding even a day, another day, that's just something I could not and will not agree to.
Yes. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I had 2 points that I wanted to look at. So fall break being 2 days, but taking away the teacher workday in September, and increasing or pushing the start date to the left gives a long time until that first teacher workday, especially for elementary school teachers. Is it possible to cut fall break there to 1 day and have that be a teacher workday and move a teacher workday into September? It could be the Thursday or the Friday. I know Thursday's advantageous due to the Tech football game. And then also, working with the schedule, when do we have to start pushing days to the end of the year when we have snow days throughout the year? And what's the usage of virtual work days going to be looking like going into the future?
So currently, like I said earlier, the state requires us to have 180 days or 990 instructional hours. So we're using the 990 hour, which is based on 6 hours of instruction on our full days of school. So like for our current calendar, that gives us about 1,035 hours. So that's what we call about 7 days of cushion time. So depending on how many inclement weather days we use, can impact that. The state is currently allowing us to use up to 10 virtual remote learning days that are related to inclement weather.
Can I ask a question? The workday that we're speaking about that was taken away, you'll have to forgive me, I didn't look back on the back calendars because my iPad was at the doctor. But is that one of the workdays that we added in after COVID that we had taken out because we added 4 extra workdays in the calendar? And is that one of them that we just kind of took back because that was a temporary kind of need, or is that a workday that was always there?
Are you referring to that September workday?
Right.
So there were, when we reduced the calendar to last year was 172 days, we did add in more, there were more work days added in.
Right. So if the one taken away wasn't one that was a standard work day in our calendar as a general rule to the last few years, correct? Thank you.
I do have a question about the spring break and how it's a whole week long. Where did we take those days from? Because I know that we haven't had a spring break in quite some time.
So we put a day, we're starting school on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. So that's one place. We, winter break, because right now, our current winter break for this calendar was 2 days longer, so we took 2 days there as well. And then we've taken out, we took out some of the work days that were in the calendar. So we took out a September workday, we took out a February workday, and those became instructional days for students.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
+1 was added on back to school.
Yeah, I was curious to get the student rep reports, opinions about this as well. So in addition to questions, just your general reaction would be interesting.
I do agree on the, okay, so is this like current calendar for next year or this year?
For next year.
Okay, next year. And that's 177 days? Okay. So where would we take the 3 days from if we were to make it 180?
Well, therein lies the rub. We'd have to work on that and figure out where we would take that from.
Okay. Okay.
Wouldn't necessarily be taking it from somewhere, it'd be adding it somewhere.
Okay.
I also had a question. So, in December, I know that, okay, it appears that the winter break has not changed in length, or has it? Because, could you scroll, please? Thank you. The 16th of December through the 19th, 20th, sorry, of December, are those like SOL days, or are those technically instructional days?
So those do count as instructional days. There would likely be SOL testing, so there may be some of those days where some students at the secondary level may not have to report to school, but those are designated as instructional days.
Okay, so it would not be different from what happened this year, because as someone who did not take any SOLs, well, did not take any classes with SOLs, I kind of missed that last week before winter break, so would that still happen? I mean, I'm not gonna be here, but.
So traditionally, since December is the end of the semester, and that's when we do some end-of-course SOL testing, yeah, there would likely be SOL tests scheduled on possibly the 18th, 19th, and 20th.
Okay. Thank you.
To add on to that, do those days count as hours to our school year?
So those days do count as part of our instructional hours.
Cool.
I'd just like to share that the feedback that I've gotten about the calendar has been largely positive, that parents and educators who have reached out to me have been glad to see some of the changes and the break in March. It's not a radical decision to have a spring break that's not tied to a holiday in school systems outside of Montgomery County. Like, that, it is a thing that occurs. The teacher workday added onto that week does seem like it could make it kind of long, so that might be something to reconsider. And with the extra days, you're also keeping these longer hours, so it's really like a lot more time than just 177 days, but it's also that longer instructional day as well, which I thought was good. To echo, I think, some of the things that Dr. Gitry had said, I have gotten feedback about more planning time and more instructional time, although there are a lot of voices in support of some, and some who are saying that they were happy with this proposal. I've also gotten some feedback about extending the year in the spring, and I don't know quite how that works with standardized testing, if you're able to kind of adjust that, because, you know, days in the spring after standardized testing are not high quality education days where there's like a lot of learning happening. It's kind of like some celebrations and some, you know, kind of phasing into the next stage of the year. So I think that was all I wanted to share right now. But thank you so much for your hard work.
Board members, any other comments?
Can I make just a couple of comments here about the spring break, as you were making eye contact at me when we talked about Virginia Tech, and obviously I work for Virginia Tech. But if I'm not mistaken, the school systems around the state have been moving spring break earlier, because one of the things that I've heard is that having that late spring break poses difficulty for AP courses and exams. Is that accurate? Those two things that I've heard, that other school systems in the state are moving the spring break earlier into March. And also, I've heard that it is a problem having a late spring break I've heard that from teachers.
The feedback that I've heard from teachers, and this is in regard to both upcoming SOL tests in May as well as AP tests, is that having a long break right before we get to May, it creates some anxiety. There's this concern that it will negatively impact the outcomes of how students perform on those tests.
Thank you. Just to address it, because I know that this has been a historic issue, the non-alignment, and it's seen as a kind of a pet project of District G to align the calendars. I just want to address that in two different levels. One, Virginia Tech employees live in all four corners of this county. I think one of the assumptions about the alignment is that Virginia Tech professors make a lot of money and they can absorb the child care costs. As you probably know, there's an acute shortage of child care in this county. So when you don't align and you have a long spring break, that is a burden on a lot of families. You may not know that tenured and tenure-track faculty only represent 52% of the faculty, that a third of the faculty are instructional faculty or adjunct. And what that means, if you're an adjunct professor, you earn in my college about $6,000 per course. Lots of graduate students. There are 7,000 graduate students at Virginia Tech. They're not all based in Blacksburg. A lot of them have children in MCPS. So I'm going to disabuse some people of a notion of what it means to absorb having disaggregated calendars and have them to both be extended. And I know that I'm not trying to personalize this, because I know that it has come up in years past. And so I think it's important that we meet the needs of all of our community members. And I know that it is a hardship by having the longer one. I think if you needed to make it shortened, certainly by moving that a workday maybe from that around spring break earlier in the semester. But I've heard from people who who feel very strongly about moving and aligning the calendars so that it's not such a hardship.
Me again, unless you want to go. Okay. So I wasn't going to go there with the alignment, but not all of employees at Virginia Tech are in teaching positions, and they do not get the spring break. Therefore, they have to be at work, and they have to endure the same issues around childcare. So trying to align a calendar with one institute or one company or whatever, unless there's some relief for everybody, I don't think it's fair to the rest of the county. So at one point, and I've been trying to find it in the presentation, you mentioned adding minutes to the day. Did I hear something wrong?
No.
Okay.
Go an extra few minutes every day. I think that's what you were saying.
That we do already.
So the hours that we go, they account for, when we look at days in the year, it gives us time. Sometimes we call it bank time, sometimes it's called cushion time, that enables us to meet that 990 hours or the state required time.
Right. Which is what the board was asked to consider approving a couple of years ago, and we did, adding that. And then several years ago, we added bank time because we had a lot of snow, and we had about 15 snow days or so that we had to try to recover from. Well, across the state, everybody was struggling with that year. So how much longer are our school days than the surrounding counties at this point? That we're making up extra time, extra instructional time by adding minutes. And so now if we're trying to add more days and we also added more minutes, where are we at with that?
We surveyed the schools in Region 6 last year. So we had the lowest number of school days than any school in Region 6 at 176 instructional days. The next lowest was somebody on par with us, was 176, was Henry County. And then after that, Allegheny Highlands was 180 days, Botetourt was 179, Craig County was 180, Danville was 182, Floyd was 184, Franklin was 179, Martinsville 180, Patrick 180, Pittsylvania 180, Roanoke 176, Roanoke County 180, and Salem was 176. Now, when you look at the school day, length of time the students are in the school, we were the second lowest, only after Botetourt. Our elementary hours are 6 hours and 30 minutes. The majority of schools in the 6 hour and 40, 6 hour and 50. Danville is 7 hours and 15. Floyd is 6 hours and 50 minutes. And for middle school, we're at 6 hours and 45 minutes. That, again, is the second lowest, only to Botetourt, which is 6 hours and 35. Other schools have 7 hours and 15 minutes, 7 hours, 7:05, 6:50. And for high school, again, we are the second lowest, except for Botetourt at 6 hours and 45 minutes. Botetourt is 6 hours and 31, and the rest are almost all 6:45, 6:57, or 7 hours or more. So while we have a low number of days, we also have a low number of hours compared to others in the region.
And this is off topic for this calendar, but if I don't say it now, I'm going to forget it. So we have been contacted by our voter register, and have we adjusted the calendar for the 5th, or
I missed that question.
voting, the primaries, elections?
We have not as of yet. So we didn't close school on the 5th. Is that what you're asking me? For this school year, for the primary?
Yeah. Yeah, because we have, I think it was like 13 of our schools are used as polling places.
November 5th
Is
is a
it?
teacher work day.
Okay. Okay, that's what I was just asking.
No, you're asking about the primary, aren't you?
Yes, yes. Mhm.
You're talking about November.
Presidential primary this year.
Primary's
Yeah,
in March,
March 5th.
correct? Yeah.
So we don't have a conflict.
Well, we might. I'm not sure if we've answered that.
We haven't made that adjustment yet, and, I got that email. I know you shared it with us, and we went over it. I think you shared it with me today. We haven't addressed that. We'll take a look at that.
I believe we have not always closed. We certainly can, but there have been many, many times when elections are held, there's a separate entrance. And so that, we are prepared for that. I have been working with facilities on that. We could certainly make a calendar change, but we are prepared to have those elections in our buildings on those days.
I'd like to think through it more, and again, we got that information today from, I think, Ms. Franklin, you shared it with me, so did Mr. Hudson, as far as that's other schools were adjusting their schedules and going remote. I'd like to talk about it as a team and then come back to the school board with a suggestion, because the remote day we did have last week, the feedback I got wasn't very good, and it wasn't well received. So I want to make sure we weigh all those options, if that makes sense to all of you.
So if what I'm hearing Dr. Whitaker say is we can keep the schools open and still have the voting in place.
Again, I'm new to having primaries in March, forgive me, where I come from, primaries were in June, so it was after the school year typically, but we have had elections where I came from where we would have the schools open and make sure the access to the polling places were limited and people didn't wander around the schools, and we would have additional security guards and all that to make sure we had it taken care of. So I would rather than weigh all those options and come back to all you with a suggestion than say something more ignorant than I already did.
I think
Sounds good. All right, well, thank you, board. This has been a very robust conversation. I'm not sure many topics that come before us are more engaging than calendars. For me, I would definitely applaud the calendar committee, the administration for being open to considering some changes. I think that's a good thing. For me, I looked around at surrounding counties. We are unique in not offering a spring break in a lot of these counties that have more hours and more days than we do. So, it would make sense to try to incorporate one into our calendar, and particularly on a year where Easter is so late. This year, Easter was really early. This coming year, 25, it's almost at the end of April, so it's a long time to go without a substantial break, not only for our students, but for our staff. I think, would a full week be nice? Absolutely. Maybe we look at a shorter, we aren't currently doing it, so anything's better than nothing. Maybe we don't do a full week. I think there's some things there to consider. Certainly, of the feedback that I think a lot of us saw, the fewer number of teacher work days was concerning for some populations. If I'm not mistaken, the winter break that's proposed is shorter for teachers than it is now. I believe that's right. So, those days had to come from somewhere. Still though, I feel like we accounted for more days than just the 5 that we're kind of adding to the schedule. So I think it's worth some continued discussion around this. I'd be curious to know from the calendar committee folks, what changes were changed after they talked to it that they weren't comfortable with. I'd like to kind of get more information around that as well. So glad we're not voting on this tonight. So got a lot to think on and discuss. But I think this is a step in a good direction, but we still have some work to do here. All right, any other conversation on this before we move on? All right. Thank you, Dr. Wadner. All right. So potentially the third most enjoyable conversation for us tonight would be a school board retreat. So certainly something that we always strive to plan, something that's always challenging for us to work out. We're all busy people with different schedules and availabilities, but with so many new folks on the board this year, I think there's a strong interest from what I've heard from everyone to get a school board retreat scheduled sooner rather than later, in some fashion, so we can kind of get to know our new members better. There's a lot of things that would be helpful to discuss with them, to kind of introduce them to things within our community, in our school board, but also just to learn more about each other and how to work together. So, I've only been on the school board a couple of years, obviously, but I've already experienced 2 completely different flavors of school board retreats. One is actually going away. That's a retreat. As Penny would say, that's a retreat. The other one was an off-site meeting, right? Roger that.
Thank you.
So, certainly pros and cons of each, aside from the semantics, but, both from a scheduling availability, cost, all the things, right? So, I really just kind of want to open the floor here and get thoughts about where as a board we want to lean. Again, for me, I think the priority is doing something sooner rather than later, but obviously trying to factor in something that works for everybody's schedule. So, I guess in general, just want to take the temperature of the board. What direction we want to go here?
As soon as possible. I think it's very important. I remember when I was board chair, had 4 new board members and a new superintendent. And the retreat that we did to help board members get to know each other better, understand our personalities and decision-making styles went a long, long way to keep us moving and not just wondering why on earth would you say that? All right. So I would say sooner than later, and when I say sooner, I mean next month. For real. When I first came on the board, our school board retreats were in February. Yeah, so, anyway, that's my 2, 5, 6 cents about what we need to be doing right now to make sure we stay on a good track with each other.
Do you have proposed or suggested dates or budgets? Like money that you allocate towards this investment so that we can know each other and work together as a group, or it's just kind of?
Definitely no dates yet. I think that, this conversation was meant to kind of point us in a direction to start proposing that. Certainly if we are doing a true retreat, then that's looking more to weekend. Last year's off-site meetings, if you will, were midweek, right? So that's a different kind of schedule to look at, right? So I think I'd like to get a direction from the board tonight, and then we can start looking at dates. Budget-wise, have to check on that. I'm not sure how
We have money for school board trainings.
Especially since we used to do conferences that have been, we don't do conferences anymore because we dropped out of the NSBA, so that should leave some funding for, a lot of funding for being able to do a retreat. But I'm for either. I know I've voiced an opinion. I'm good for business meetings if we don't, or meetings, but I'm good for a retreat too. I've always enjoyed it. A getaway does make a difference, as long as it's short and sweet,
And it's not good if it's short and sweet, and I'm not the one who wants to be around you, right?
We've done, a lot of fun, and I have to say, I wasn't especially fond of our last year. I think we didn't get as much accomplished as I think we could have if we'd have did something else, so with that being said.
I'm not a board member, but I only participated in the one, was it last October? We went a Friday into Saturday evening or Saturday. That seemed to be the ideal amount of time. And I think I was new, but I think we got a lot done. So if we could look at something like that,
Especially
maybe a
February.
Friday into Saturday.
I would echo, I think that something that starts on a Friday, because I teach Tuesday, Thursday, and I can't do those days, and I think leading into the weekend makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely.
I'm getting a general consensus here around some kind of a weekend actual retreat. Is that?
Yeah, that's
That's what's called a
For me, too.
retreat, yeah.
So if I've got to take 2 days off of work and lose 2 days of pay because I don't have paid days off, it better be a retreat.
Everything good, right?
That's all I got to say, okay?
Got it. All right. Well, awesome.
I'll say that right now.
Okay, so for me, I think next steps would be to look at the calendars, propose some dates, check availability. Obviously, we want everybody there for this to be effective, so we'll put some polls together and figure it out.
I can't do the end of February.
Oh, here we go.
Let's do the beginning.
Right, okay.
I think Penny's proposing a Valentine's retreat.
No, that I will say no to. Yeah.
I'm chaperoning a Girl Scout trip, President's Day weekend, so I know that one's bad for me.
What people have on their calendars, won't you ask that?
Yeah, I guess if we already have some
Some out,
availabilities, we can at least cross off some weekends.
I can do the 3rd or the 17th, or go into March. I would say, I
It's
think
time
we're
for planning.
probably looking at the 1st of March. We're at the end of January already.
What do we think about March 1st and 2nd? Is anybody not available the weekend of March 1st and 2nd? Come on, Ed.
I do have an obligation for a committee meeting on the 1st.
What
I
time?
mean, it's at noon.
This would
If
be
I,
like
if I
a-
need to get out, if I need to not be there, I can, but I do have a obligation right now on that day.
I was gonna say, typically, we do a half a day on Friday and all day on Saturday. Is that what we're thinking? So that way, like a 2 o'clock kind of deal
Yeah,
on
sure,
Friday,
yeah.
and then, so,
That would be fine.
okay.
Does anybody else have any issues with?
Also directed a question to Ms. Seidemann about all-district choir and the first weekend of March. What would an obligation for a parent that weekend be? Because it's my first go-around with that. Middle school. So for the student or for the parent? Just for the student? Oh. Concerts in the evening. Okay, so would we be done by Saturday evening, or would we still be, okay?
About 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're the 8th.
Ed, I'm hearing from the grapevine that your kids might be in a science fair on that Saturday. Is that a problem?
Yeah.
What about the 8th or the 9th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the first Science Olympiad
Oh, yeah.
is on, I think this is Science Olympiad, is that day from 3 to 4.
Yeah, we wouldn't be done we wouldn't be done that early probably, so, yeah.
What about the 8th or the 9th? Is that?
How about, I'm sure this is super exciting for everybody here listening, but let's try one more date. If this doesn't work, then we'll take it offline. How about the 8th or the 9th of March?
That's what I was gonna say. It looks like there's some conflicts on the 1st and the 2nd, so why don't we just move to the following weekend? And has anybody got
Anybody have
any
any-
conflicts that week?
yeah.
That Friday or that Saturday?
8th or the 9th?
It's in.
Derek, Laura, you good? 8th and the 9th?
Yep.
8th and the 9th? Okay.
Penny, 8th and 9th?
Penny?
All right,
All right. Hot dog.
all right, we got the day set. Yay.
Sweet deal. All right, we'll take that date as our goal, and we'll discuss options.
Lake, Hotel Roanoke.
Right. Awesome. Great. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate that. We'll obviously have conversations about agenda and items that we want to try to cover in that. I heard at one point y'all did a Myers-Briggs kind of exercise at one of those, so awesome. All righty? Where am I? Okay, I think that concludes our business meeting portion of our agenda. Now we're on to unfinished business. We don't have any unfinished business I'm aware of. Any items of new business?
That when our students are reading our vision and mission statement, that we also show it on the screen so that there is a visual to have more of an impact, I believe.
So we make sure they're reading it right? I got it.
That's all I have.
Go. Any other items to bring up under new business?
I'm
Okay.
not sure if this is necessarily the right place to bring it up, but I really wanted to just say I appreciated what Lishu shared at our last meeting, and I know, Linwood, you had asked her to follow up with an email, but I was just wondering if there was any consideration of doing some kind of climate survey or outreach to the LGBTQ populations that she spoke about last time.
don't believe I've seen her feedback yet.
No, I've had a conversation with Mr. Stewart, and we're working on what we think would be the best way to approach that and try to address those needs at the building level with our input and support from the school board. And I'll follow up with all of you where we live.
Thank you so much.
And with at least you two.
You know that there was a school climate survey that was actually conducted in December, at least at BHS, because as a parent, I got that email, but I'm not sure what those results ended up being. To have more information about that as well. Okay, anything else?
So in our last meeting, we tabled the norms and protocol item for voting. Are we going to bring that up in another meeting and go into depth on what those are and what changes we wanted to make to them?
Yes, absolutely. I think, for me, that would be a good topic for a board retreat. But that's something we can discuss in terms of agenda items.
So was that, are we on old business?
Sorry, yeah, we're on, technically, that would have been an unfinished business item. Okay. On to announcements and information. Any announcements from anyone on the board?
Old business, that's what I'm saying.
I'm sorry. Yeah, we did unfinished business first before new business. But nobody,
Okay, well, I missed it, so.
okay.
Because I have a couple of items. One is collective bargaining and getting that process, quite frankly, done and over with so that we can move on with that. I understand it's possibly our attorneys who are prolonging things, which you all know how I feel about them in this process. So I would just like to see that. I know there was something that was shared, and I couldn't figure out who was talking to who about what. So,
On that version that was shared, the black line was what we had come to and what our school board attorney had put together, and the red crossed out line was what the representative attorney from the MCA. I met with verbally over the phone, spoke with our attorney today, gave her our feedback on the question she had. She's going to meet with the attorney from the MCA. I think she said, what day is today, Tuesday, on Thursday. So she was confident that they could wrap that up sooner than later, and as soon as I get that, I'll share that with all of you.
yeah, but their sooner or later may not be our sooner or later. And if we're paying these people, they better be on our sooner. So,
I relayed the frustration that the school board had with the time it was taking, but I've yet to meet an attorney that works fast.
because I scrolled with that, and all I could see was green lines. Never, unless I missed something, saw any red lines.
I'll resend it and take a look at it. Maybe I did something wrong, Ms. Franklin, I'm not sure.
Thank you. And then I have some concerns about the pay that folks who are being asked to volunteer to help clean the schools, and the disparity between that and our regular custodians who do that.
If it's okay, I think Dr. Whitaker could respond to that. I think that's a miscommunication as far as what the people were getting paid. It wasn't as high as some of the people had thought it was, and we had shared that with them. Maybe we didn't get that information out to everyone.
Yeah, the rate of pay was based upon what a custodian would make at the lowest rate of pay, working time and a half. So the goal was to make sure that we were providing it to them, because that was the first group of employees that we wanted to offer that opportunity for. So what we did is we looked at that rate of pay that they would make if they were working a 40-hour week and making time and a half, and that was where that was determined from. We worked first to offer all overtime hours to our custodians, and then when we saw that we weren't being able to staff those was when we opened it up to other individuals as well. But we're happy, if there's anybody who has questions, to address those and speak with them about that. But our priority is always on providing those overtime hours to the individuals who do those jobs first.
So there is no custodian who is making less money in overtime than anyone who is volunteered.
I would, Dr. Wagner, I'd like to confirm, but yes, that's where the rate was set, correct? The bottom of the scale,
Okay.
and time and a half for that.
Okay. So how is the overtime, let me right look at this. So if we have a custodian who was already at 40 hours, how many more hours are we allowing them to work during a week or a certain period of time that would increase the amount of time they would actually have to do the overtime versus someone else who doesn't have any kind of limitation as to how much overtime that they would be making, or that their hours wouldn't apply the same way? I don't know if that's
Are you saying, is there a maximum amount of overtime hours that they could pick up?
right for our custodians?
I don't believe that we have limited that. We're not offering it every day, all the time. Dr. Widener, has there been a limit on that? But for the custodians,
No limit.
no limit.
Okay.
Our goal would be, again, just, they know the job best, so we certainly want to. I think what was happening was people were getting tired of always being the ones to work the overtime, or maybe just their schedule didn't allow. But our priority is always on providing those overtime hours to those individuals.
Okay, so my concern was if there was any kind of disparity between our custodians and anyone who was stepping up to help out.
So the custodian, they're hourly employees, so that's the base rate. If they make more per hour, they would also make more per hour because we're required by law to pay them time and a half based upon their standard rate of pay. But again, if there are specific individuals who are concerned, that's probably our best way to help address it as well, to make sure there's nothing that we're overlooking.
Just as long as there are no custodians making less during overtime than anyone who has volunteered to help out. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so just to follow up, any other items of unfinished business? Okay, any additional items of new business?
Just ask what time our meeting is Monday night with the Board of Supervisors. I looked at my emails and I didn't see it anywhere.
Appeared magically on my calendar.
Okay.
And I have it
Didn't
at-
appear on mine.
I have it at 6:30.
Okay, thank you. There we go. That's all I need.
Probably send out a reminder, though. And it's at
Sometimes-
Christiansburg High School.
Sometimes we get calendar invites in our inbox. Other times it just magically appears, so I'm not sure
Right.
the difference there. But okay, so now, any announcements or information to share?
So this Saturday at 10 o'clock, the Dialogue on Race will have our winter summit, and education will be one of the main topics. So I invite everyone to attend. We will be providing a box lunch, so if you register, that will really help with that. You can just go to the website if you haven't received an invitation already.
Anything else?
Go ahead.
There will also be a coffee with our law enforcement agencies, starting at 9, our departments. So we encourage people to please come out and have good conversation.
And I'd just like to bring to attention of the board that the Virginia Senate has passed a bill in order to provide free school meals for all Virginia students. And if that passes in the House and then the governor signs it, then we'll have free meals for all of our students in this county. So, well, the wealthiest country will at least have one state that provides meals for their students.
Very cool.
Mr. Farmer, who is the band teacher at Blacksburg Middle School, he had emailed all of us already and the administration, but I did just want to share publicly that Blacksburg Middle School had 40 students that were placed in the 2024 District 6 Middle School All-District Band, and that's just a really great achievement for students at that level. Often, they're just starting with their instrument in day one in 6th grade, and I think that just the progress that all the music teachers at the middle school level make is so impressive. So I just wanted to share that publicly.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, great. Upcoming school board meetings, you can see the current dates that we have on the calendar in board docs. The 29th, as we discussed, is our joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors at 6:30. Currently scheduled to have our next regular session February 6th. Certainly in our conversation earlier, we talked about needing an additional meeting to talk about the budget. We'll look for information from the administration and have a conversation about when we want to try to schedule that additional meeting, either before our regular session or after it, depending upon availability and all the good stuff there. So we'll have a follow-up conversation on that. You can see the other upcoming meetings in board docs. All righty, so now we're on to closed session. Do I have a motion to enter into closed session as authorized by section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia? Sorry?
So moved.
Second.
Discuss personnel needs. I think Jamie made that motion, and I think Ed seconded it.
It was like 4 seconds.
Yeah, there was a lot of seconds there. Got thirds and fourths.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. We are in closed session.